Greetings, my name is Cadet Major Destra Edson Christopher, and today we'll delve into one of the most tactically brilliant and devastating defeats in military history, the Battle of Cannae, fought in 216 after Christ during the Second Punic War. Cannae isn't just an ancient battle, it's a masterclass of maneuver, envelopment, and exploiting enemy weaknesses. Its lessons on leadership, strategy, and the human element of warfare continue to be studied in military academies worldwide. In this presentation, we'll explore the historical backdrop, the opposing forces, and the unfolding of the battle itself, and the profound consequences that rippled through the ancient world. So, as a historical backdrop, the, the Punic Wars were a series of three major wars between the Roman Republic and the Carthaginian Empire, also known sometimes as the Phoenicians. The Punic Wars lasted from 264 to 146 before Christ. These wars were fought over dominance in the Western Mediterranean. The first Punic Wars was fought primarily over the islands of Sardinia and Sicily. The island of Sardinia is here, and Sicily is positioned right over here. Were Rome and Carthage, this is the map in green of the early Roman Republic, and Carthage were this yellowish right here. It spanned the coasts of most of the Western Mediterranean and the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula. Rome and Carthage clashed to control the Western Mediterranean, and ultimately Rome won, gaining control of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. Sicily is this area here, Sardinia is this island here, and Corsica is this island here, all on its north. So now let's get to the Second Punic War, where the Battle of Cannae was fought. For a little bit of background, Cannae is situated here in the southern part of the Italian peninsula, right over here. The Second Punic War was essentially declared and led by a brilliant Carthaginian general named Hannibal. Hannibal crossed the Alps and into Italy and achieved several stunning victories against the Roman legion. We can see here this map depicts the Hannibal's route from 219 to 202 BCE, starting here in Carthago Nova, going through Saguntum, all the way through the Alps as he crossed the Alps and went into Italy and wreaked havoc into the Italian peninsula, which at the time was the early Roman Republic. And our focus here, as previously mentioned, will be here in Cannae. Now, to understand Cannae, we must first understand the context of the Second Punic War. This was the second major conflict between the burgeoning Roman Republic and the powerful Carthaginian Empire, centered today in modern-day Tunisia. Now, key drivers of this conflict. As I previously mentioned, competition over the Mediterranean. Both Rome and Carthage were vying to control key trade routes, resources, and as great powers tend to influence over this particular piece of land and sea here. Now, the first Punic War ended with a bitter defeat of Carthage, which fueled a vast amount of resentment and a desire for revenge. And also, we must consider Rome's harsh punishment on Carthage as to accept peace after they vanquished the Carthaginian Empire. Both powers were actively expanding their territories, inevitably leading to clashes of interest, particularly in regions like Sicily and Iberia. Sicily is this island here, as it's really close, this early to Italy, which at the time was known as the Roman Republic. And Iberia is this area where today's Spain and Portugal is this peninsula that's right over here. Um, so both empires were actively expanding their territories at the time and inevitably leading to clashes of interests, particularly in regions, as I previously mentioned, like Sicily and Iberia. Hannibal Barca, a brilliant Carthaginian general, became the central figure of this conflict, driven by a deep-seated hatred for Rome instilled by his father, Amilcar de Barca. He initiated the war by attacking Saguntum, a Roman protectorate in Iberia. As I previously mentioned, Iberia is this peninsula here, and Saguntum is right there. This was the first battle of the Second Punic War. Here, at the Battle of Cannae in 215 BC, the Roman army numbered around 86,000 soldiers, while the Carthaginian army, led by Hannibal, numbered around 50,000. In a daring and unprecedented move, Hannibal led his army across the Alps, as opposed to attack directly from the south, crossing the Mediterranean. He went through the Iberian Peninsula and up north and attacked the Roman Republic at the time through the Alps, which was completely unprecedented, and the Roman army was not prepared at all. It caught them completely off guard. The attack came, for a little bit of background, uh, Hannibal had two victories 2 years ago. Prior to Cannae, Hannibal achieved significant victories against Roman forces. One, first at the Battle of Trebia River, and second at the Battle of Lake Trasimene in 217 BC and 218 BC for the former. These defeats already demonstrated Hannibal's tactical prowess and severely weakened the Roman morale. These earlier battles highlighted Roman strategic missteps and their underestimation of Hannibal's capabilities. The Romans, accustomed to battlefield success struggled to adapt to Hannibal's innovative tactics. So Hannibal's innovative tactics was more maneuverability, while the Roman army uh, believed, or rather fought in a formation where they were rigid and they preferred like flat surfaces where they would fight, go force and force, 1-to-1, just brute attrition fight. This was good for them because they had the superior numbers. Now, Hannibal's innovative tactics were novel at the time, and the Romans would viewed them as they call treachery, or trickery rather. The Roman army was led by two consuls, here in red. So the way they would divide it was one consul was Gaius Tyrannus Varro, and the second one was Lucius Aemius Paulus. The Roman military command rotated in between those two consuls, a system that often led to indecisiveness and conflicting strategies. Now you can imagine the two commanders had different approaches to things and different ways of leading their armies, and perhaps different ways of fighting, different strategies, different ways of viewing the battlefield and decision making. The Roman strategy simply was, in general, that's one thing that was common and constant between those two, was the use of overwhelming force. They aimed to crush their enemy with just sheer number, believing that their manpower would ultimately prevail in a war of attrition. Now, in contrast to the massive Roman legion, Hannibal's army at Cannae was significantly smaller, and as I mentioned, around 40 to 50,000 men. However, they were seasoned and battle hardened, and they were composed of a very diverse contingent, including here the African cavalries, African infantry here, the Nubian cavalry there, and we have the Spanish cavalry in the middle, and Spanish and Gaulish cavalry right there. These forces were very, very expensive. Now, talking about experience on this topic, we may also mention Hannibal's leadership experience. He was a military genius. He was very cunning. He was adaptable, and he really inspired his troop. The Nubian cavalry, in particular, was highly mobile and effective, and we'll see this through the animation, which I'll later show how effective that was to the overall battle plan here at the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal positioned his army strategically in the plains. Now, if you looking at that map, the north is here, the battlefield here. We have on this side of the river Hannibal's camp and a large Roman camp here. We can see the legends here, and we have this river that runs east to west, the Idaphus River, that limits the combat operation of the fight to the south. And this plain here, as we'll see later in the video, is mainly flat. The Hannibal's army was trained to execute complex maneuvers, while the Roman army was trained to stay in formation and fight a war of attrition. Now, Hannibal got the chance, since they're the ones attacking, to choose where the battle was fought. They choose this battlefield because it would favor the cavalry and allow more freedom of maneuver. The battlefield of Cannae was relatively flat, as I mentioned, bordered by a river to the south. And this limited Hannibal's maneuverability on that side, but it also protected their flank here. So not only do they get to choose the battlefield, but they get to dictate, because they're protected by that flank right here is protected, there's no maneuver here, they force the Roman army to maneuver on one side. Hence, they get to control what the enemy does and remove a vote from the enemy. Now, the Roman army deployed in their traditional dense formation with Roman legions here at the center and allied infantry in the wings. Their infantry focusing here, mostly here, moving from this side here over. This cavalry was positioned on the flanks, where Roman citizen cavalry would be on the right, near the river, and allied cavalry on the left. Their sheer depth aimed to break through Hannibal's center. Now, for the Carthaginians, their strategy was to deploy infantry in a crescent shape. A crescent shape, you'd see it like as a half moon, would be a more common description, or rather, to put it in layman's term. Bowing outward, and his more strongest cavalry, which is the Nubian cavalry or Libyan cavalry, if you will, was positioned in the flank, concealed to some extent. His cavalry was placed on the wings, and the formidable Nubian cavalry on the Carthaginian left, and Hannibal himself was leading a mixed force on the right. Now, as the battle commenced, the Roman infantry surged forward, their sheer weight pushing back Hannibal's center. The Gallic and Iberian troops gradually gave ground, creating a bulge in the Carthaginian line that extended inward. And thereafter, many sources tell us that one of the Roman consuls in charge of the Roman forces that day, his name was Varro, he likely believed that the Carthaginian forces were on the verge of breaking. However, the Carthaginians' apparent retreat was a deliberate tactic by Hannibal. He had instructed his center to yield slowly, while his strong flanks held firm, forming that reverse crescent here and there will be the fall of the Roman. Now, we're going to look at this video, which gives a overall global and more simplified view of the battle, and then we're going to go over an animation that goes into further detail. Let's get started. Now, let's talk about the long term consequences and impact of that said war. As I previously mentioned, this war really shook the ancient world. Now, let's talk about more direct consequences of that war. The casualties at Cannae were staggering. Estimates vary, but most historians agree that tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed, possibly as many as 50,000 to even 70,000. Among the dead were one of the consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, numerous senators, and a significant portion of Rome's fighting age male population. In contrast, Carthaginian losses were relatively light, estimated to be around 6,000 to roughly 8,000 men. The Battle of Cannae was one of the most lopsided defeats in military history and sent shocked waves through the Republic. Um, One of the immediate aftermaths of Cannae was really devastating for Rome. Many of their allies in southern Italy defected to Hannibal's side. Rome's faced a severe manpower shortage and the very survival of the Republic itself. The survival of the Republic was in jeopardy. Um, However, Romans refused to surrender. They adopted new strategies, avoided direct confrontation with Hannibal, and relied on Fabian tactics, basically kind of uh, delaying attrition, or you can might say today, more probing. Cannae became a symbol of Roman resilience and their ability to recover even from the most catastrophic of defeats. Strategically, Cannae demonstrated the effectiveness of envelopment tactics and the importance of cavalry in ancient warfare. It remains a case of military brilliance. The Battle of Cannae offers numerous lessons that are still relevant today. Hannibal's exceptional leadership was crucial in Carthaginian history, hence, the importance of leadership in warfare. Hannibal skillfully exploited the Roman army, rigid formation, and the divided command, hence, the importance of communication and maneuverability in warfare. The Carthaginian cavalry flanking maneuver was the key to their success, and also the danger of overconfidence. The Romans at the time, eh, especially coming from that first victory from the First Punic War, uh, they believed that their numerical superiority was a guaranteed victory against Hannibal, and whatever tactics that Hannibal would put in place, they would eventually come out victorious because of their sheer number. And despite the devastating loss, Rome's refusal to lead and their eventual adaptation to strategy were crucial to their survival. The Battle of Cannae stands today as a testament to Hannibal the Barca's military genius. And truly, despite them losing that war, it still remains as a stark reminder at the consequence of tactical missteps. While a crushing defeat for Rome, it ultimately forged their resolve and contributed to their eventual victory in the Second Punic War. The battle continues. This particular battle fought here at Cannae continues to fascinate and instruct military thinkers and historians alike, offering timeless insight into the art of warfare.